Did I just hear that arrogant prick Eric Bischoff say that I and the Four Horsemen were not draws? Welcome back, guys, to Fog Wrestling. According to Eric Bischoff, Ric Flair wasn't a draw. You could give him a pen and paper and he couldn't draw shit. Same with the Four Horsemen. Is it true? I will give you my thoughts after we hear what Eric Bischoff, Eazy-E, and Ric Flair had to say. So I'm going to go over what Eric Bischoff had to say, then I'll talk about Ric Flair's response, and then I'll give you my 2 cents, because I actually kind of agree with one of these people. So I like them both. I think they've both made a lot of mistakes in wrestling, but I do like them. However, I think one is more right here than the other. So let's get this feud, let's get this Flair-Bischoff rivalry rekindled. So, Eric Bischoff recently on his podcast had this to say. Now, I believe this was in response to something that Ric Flair came out and said, because it sounded like Bischoff was responding to a rant or some sort of criticism from Flair, and that's why he brought this up. He didn't just like randomly start talking about Ric Flair and bashing Ric Flair out the blue. Now, I'm not too sure what Ric Flair said previously to get Bischoff to talk about him, but he must have said something, because this was clearly in response. But I'm going to skip over the boring part, and we'll just get right up to the part that matters, essentially. So Bischoff said, and I quote, "I just pointed out this is some of Ric's best work, and he should thank me for that. I brought that out of him. I brought that level of emotion. I brought out what became really the best Ric Flair. I brought that out of him. He should be thanking me for helping him get over, instead of just being a whiny baby about this whole thing. I don't get that." If you think about it, I'm not joking around here. This is one of the reasons why I didn't want to get started in this thing, because it just escalates and escalates and escalates. And I really hope it all goes away. But I do kind of have to defend myself, or at least offer a different perspective. You know, Ric Flair was in WCW right after Ted Turner bought it. It was great for a lot of people. But the truth is, WCW couldn't make money with Ric Flair. So what did Ric Flair do? He went to WWE, and guess what? Couldn't make any money with Ric Flair in WWE. So guess what? Ric comes back to WCW, and WCW still couldn't make any money with him in 93 and 94, which is why I had to go out and get Hulk Hogan. Ric's a great performer, don't get me wrong. He's a legend, but when it comes to business, I had to do what I had to do, and apparently that just rubs Ric the wrong way. He can't let it go. I'm really sorry about that, but my God, let it go. Why is it that people that are fans of Ric and fans of the Horsemen just get all bent out of shape when you present just facts? I mean, I wasn't being critical of the Four Horsemen, I put them over. They were very, very popular among a small regional group of fans. That's when you're in the business of entertaining the entire country. That small pocket of fans in North Carolina and South East in particular that dug the Four Horsemen, well, that's cool, but that's not the whole country. The Four Horsemen were great during their era, but they certainly weren't a national act. End of quote. So here's it. Eric Bischoff is basically coming out and saying that, look, Ric Flair and the Horsemen were popular in certain territories, and were popular in certain locations and areas of the country, but in terms of like the whole country, in terms of like a mainstream thing, the Four Horsemen and Ric Flair weren't exactly all that. And you know what? I kind of do agree with Eric Bischoff, but I will give you Ric Flair's response, and then I'll talk about what I really feel about the entire situation. So, with Ric Flair responds to Eric Bischoff saying that he didn't draw any money, Flair says, quote, "He didn't get Hulk Hogan. I went and got Hulk Hogan. He didn't know Hogan. Why would Hogan know a pissant working downstairs in a camera room? I drove to Orlando with them while they met in Hulk's trailer on Hulk's movie set. He didn't go find Hulk Hogan. He didn't find Savage. He didn't find Piper. I did. I put them all over for him." End of quote. And then Flair went on to talk about Rick and Flair went on to talk about Bischoff and the Horsemen and the fact they didn't draw money, and he says, quote, "I've gone back and all I said was he was an arrogant prick, but now I can say he's an arrogant prick with no friends. Now he's pissed off Aaron and Tully. I will say this, asking why they put him on his documentary, they basically said to me that's why they wanted people to see what I had to put up with to end up where I am today. That's a good enough answer. He actually was far worse for me than Jim Herd, or worse for the business." End of quote. And then Ric Flair also went on to say there's a couple of things he likes about Eric Bischoff. Bischoff called him when his son died and no one else did, blah, 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 blah. So I'm looking at the two responses here. Eric Bischoff is coming out. He didn't insult Flair. He actually says that Flair's a great performer and that the Four Horsemen and Flair were incredibly over in certain places like North Carolina and some other places, but he just gave his honest opinion that facts and stats have kind of backed up that Ric Flair as a national act and the Four Horsemen as a national act weren't very good. Now, what did Ric Flair do in his response? Called him a pissant, said he has no friends, and then he says that the thing that really gets me is he says that Eric Bischoff didn't get Hulk Hogan. Ric Flair says that he got Hulk Hogan, but this just proves Eric Bischoff's point. It doesn't really matter who actually went to fucking Hulk Hogan's house and got him to WCW. The fact is that obviously WCW needed Hulk Hogan because they brought him in. If Ric Flair and the Horsemen were this huge fucking draw like he claims to be, then he wouldn't have had to go to Hulk Hogan's trailer. He wouldn't have had to do that. People like Hulk Hogan would have been coming to WCW to work with the fucking Nature Boy and to work with the Four Horsemen. But Rick can say that he was the one that personally knew Hulk Hogan. It doesn't matter. Eric Bischoff wanted to bring him in. Now, whether Ric Flair was the one that made it happen or whether Eric Bischoff fucking found out who Hulk Hogan lived or whatever, that doesn't really matter. The point is, WCW needed Hulk Hogan, which backs up Eric Bischoff's claims that Ric Flair and the Horsemen weren't drawn. For me, it's as simple as that. I agree with Eric Bischoff here. I think Eric Bischoff's in the right. I would actually go as far as saying that, and I'm not trying to say that Ric Flair wasn't popular back in the day, back in the 80s, because he was, right? He was. But I would honestly say that Ric Flair has become more popular since retiring than he was when he was wrestling. I do think that. We've had a lot of documentaries on Flair since he retired. We had the whole last match thing. I think Ric Flair has become more of an icon. I think he's become more of a star now than he was back in the day. I mean, yeah, he was popular back in the day. I'm not denying that. But I think if you look at what the things that Ric Flair's done in, let's say, the last like 5 to 10 years, you know, he's appeared in basketball videos. He's got his like own stuff, music songs, the ESPN. He had the last match. He has became like a star, you know, and he's more mainstream now, in my opinion, than he ever was in the 80s. So I agree with Eric Bischoff here, and it just looks like Ric Flair again. When someone says something he doesn't like, he's a sad fucking old little man. Let's be honest. I'm not going to sit here and pretend he's not. All he does is bash people. Anytime he receives criticism, he has to go on the defensive, and like here he's calling Bischoff a pissant and saying that he has no friends. The other day he says that JR has no credibility and that JR is desperate to stay relevant and that JR is not wanted by WWE. Anytime anyone says anything Ric Flair doesn't like, he just can't respond. He can't respond with facts. He can't respond in a civil manner. He has to just fucking be negative and be the Nature Boy and go on a rant and have to try and put people down. Well, you know what, man? Fuck him. Maybe Ric Flair needs put down. I don't mean that, but you know what? I agree with Eric Bischoff here, guys. So let me know what you think down below. But I basically think that even what Ric Flair said in this response, you know, Eric Bischoff offered facts and Ric Flair offered insults, and he basically offered the truth here in a sense of that he had to go and get Hulk Hogan, whether it was him or Bischoff. Hulk Hogan was brought into the company because what Eric Bischoff was saying was true. Ric Flair and the Horsemen weren't draws. So that's my opinion. I agree with Bischoff here. Let me know what you guys think down below. I will catch you in the next one, and of course, until then, it's been Fog Wrestling. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and woo, peace.